Sir, we will start the session.
Right.
Okay. So, just a minute. Good morning, everyone. Today we have assembled here for a very important discussion and a talk on a very important topic, adaptive reuse policies and practices. Architect Manish Chakraborty is an urban planner, architect, and at present professor and head of architecture at Sister Nivedita University, Kolkata. A leading conservation architect whose works has been widely published in the national and international journals and media. He has authored various books on architecture and conservation, guided students' theses, a guest columnist. He is a visiting faculty to School of Architecture in India and abroad. He has graduated in architecture from Jadavpur University. He has done his master's in urban planning from IIT and conservation from University of York in the United Kingdom. He has been a consultant to World Monuments Fund, National Museum of Denmark, Department of Culture, Government of Rajasthan, INTACH, and Archaeological Survey of India. He is the recipient of the UNESCO Asia Pacific Heritage Award of Distinction 2016 for the conservation of St. Olav Church for benchmarking conservation practice in India and the region. Manish was a part of the team leaders for the preparation of UNESCO Nomination Dossier of Santiniketan, which was inscribed as the 41st World Heritage Site of India on 17 September 2023. Sir's work is incredible and it extends much beyond this. But for the sake of time, I will invite Sir to start his lecture now. And as a point of just to say that Sir's work has been thus one of the starting point from which this idea of conservation has got wings. So before that, the awareness was also very less, but Sir's work is incredibly and significantly added to the importance of this particular domain of study and practice. I welcome you, sir, for the lecture.
Thank you. What is the time that we have today? What is the structure? I mean, how long?
Sir, actually, it is of 1 hour as of now, but we can continue because it is primarily for master students and they have time. So doesn't matter. We think we are very lucky to have you on this platform and we will all try to learn together. So you can continue, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. So should I begin?
Yes.
Thank you very much. APJ School of Architecture at Greater Noida in the UP. I am pleased to deliver this talk and subsequent discussion for the students of architecture at APG and all others who have joined through this link, because I was told that it is open link. Thank you, Dr. Vivek Saverwal, who is the director of the APJ School of Architecture. And thank you, Deepashri, for inviting me to deliver this topic on adaptive reuse and policies and practice. I will go straight to the presentation. But before that, I would, as I learned that it's about 1 hour, half an hour, maybe 1.5 hours. So I will limit my presentation to 45 to 50 minutes, and then we can follow up with some discussion. I begin here. In India, we have got total number of sites which are protected, mapped is roughly around 1,24,061. When I say protected, I say they are under some kind of a legislation, has some level of protection, either by organizations, mostly by organizations. Archaeological Survey of India protects about 3,693 monuments. The state archaeology, which follows the same Ancient Monument and Archaeological and Remains Sites Act, that accounts to 4,376. There are different ministries like Ministry of Education, Ministry of Defense. They also have some buildings to the tune of 896. And there are a lot of religious, local trust which are there. But this constitutes only 7% of the mapped built heritage which are protected. And there are innumerable 5 lakh plus in India, which are not protected, unprotected, so to say. As I was saying, there are Ministry of Culture, ASI has got 40 World Heritage Sites, with ASI as a nodal agency. Then CPWD has some monuments under theirs. Ministry of Railways, a lot of lovely buildings that belongs to the railways, that constitute about 210 buildings across the country I'm talking about. Ministry of Shipping has got 99 lighthouses. These lighthouses are fantastic. And the Ministry of Communications also has some monuments. So all that constitutes the protected monument. Ministry of Tourism has got, Ministry of Mines, Defense, and so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, as I was saying, these state archaeology departments, local municipality, state forest departments, religious endowments and trusts, PWDs, revenue department, irrigation, all these constitute roughly around 1.5 lakhs of monuments which are mapped, and we know about them, and they have some level of protection, or great level of protection, while there are innumerable number of monuments and buildings and heritage buildings and structures which are unprotected in this country. Therefore, legislation. One of the principal legislation, Sumantra, I'll call you back. One of the principal legislation that we have was way back in 1958, and which was modified in 2010, administered by the Archaeological Survey of India, called AMASR Act. And this was modified in 2010 for greater management of the sites around the protected monument by the Central Archaeological Survey of India. Like, for example, how they will manage the area around the protected monument, like say Jantar Mantar in Delhi, which is a protected monument by the Archaeological Survey of India. It's one of the 3,693 monuments of the protected monuments in the country. And as you know, it just sits besides the APJ Park Hotel, and APJ actually maintains and promotes and protects or funds the protection of that particular Jantar Mantar in New Delhi, near Connaught Place. And so how you manage, that was kind of brought about by the modification of the AMSR Act of 1958 in 2010, which talks about a protected area, which is the monument and the boundary of the monument. And then beyond that, 100 meters from that boundary, you have got the prohibitive area. which is where you cannot construct any further building. Whatever has happened has been constructed, can only be improved upon, but you cannot construct anything, which is called the prohibitive area. And beyond the prohibitive area, another 200 meters, you have got the regulated area. And 2010 modification of the MSR Act talks about constitution of a national body or authority called National Monuments Authority. So any development taking place in the regulated area, which is beyond the prohibitive and the prohibitive area, has to be regulated, meaning that if you want to develop any development in the regulated area, then you have to make an application to this authority called National Monuments Authority, which will oversee your plan, and then either say it is accepted, you can go ahead doing it, or they can defer it and ask you to change it, or they can reject it. So they can say that you cannot do it. So that is the management aspect that was introduced in 2010 of areas around the protected monument. But this is the scenario of many other monuments which are not protected, as I was mentioning again and again, that there are so many innumerable number of buildings and monuments which are of great archaeological, structural, political, cultural significance, which are not protected by any law as yet, neither by the state, nor by the center, nor by the local authority. And therefore, this vast amount of unprotected monument remains unattended in a country like ours, which is pretty huge. So the challenge really is mapping the heritage, which is, I think, the challenge number one. So we need to have a policy for a national register, which can be open access, and it can have a web portal, so anybody can refer to these mapping. Challenge number two, of course, is ownership and protection, where legislation for unprotected structures are very much necessary. As we know, Bombay has led this at the local level. Bombay heritage laws enacted by the local municipal corporation was the first which actually identifies many buildings and areas, which they call it precinct, are being identified, and they have been trying to work out how to protect, how to give some level of protection against demolition of buildings which are unprotected in India. So Bombay was the first municipal corporation. I remember it was Sham Chenani with his tireless efforts who kind of worked towards this listing, which then spread to other cities like Kolkata, Madurai, Madras, and other cities as well. And Delhi, of course, has got too many organizations looking after Delhi, which has got a lot of cross purposes. So I'm not very sure as yet whether Delhi has a heritage laws at the municipal or corporation level. Challenge number three is the most important challenge, because one of the major concern or challenge in India with regard to heritage buildings and monuments is how you try to give life to these buildings. How do you justify its restoration when we have got so many pressing other issues to cater to in cities, starting from drainage, starting from sewerage, starting from flooding, addressing flooding, etc., etc. I remember a couple of years ago, Noida was flooded with water, and the problems that it has. So how you reconcile conservation of this vast amount of unprotected, lack of protection laws, for these monuments, which can be demolished, which can be pulled down by the developer or the owner, and something else can be built, in the process erasing the local history of that place. At the same time, we are a developing nation. Unlike the Western world, which is a developed nation and where their birth rates are kind of coming down, so their conservation is a natural extension of their concern is how you make use of the redundant spaces. And our concern is how you kind of reuse or repurpose these buildings, which are otherwise doesn't hold much meaning for the owner or the developer, and they are often and mercilessly pulled down. So that's the real challenge, I think, where you can reconcile conservation with development for the survival of this unprotected monument. Because by the time we kind of overcome the challenge number one, which is mapping heritage, that itself will take a long time. And while we are doing that, there are many other heritage buildings which are getting pulled down. And challenge number four is, of course, funding. So funding and conservation of disused or underused or redundant buildings goes hand in hand, and they can address perhaps both these concerns together, and policies linked to tax incentives, how you can facilitate this process. So if you see challenge number three, which is conservation, adaptive reuse of disused buildings, and if you kind of link it up with funding, and if you can link it up with government tax incentives, then how these three things can be thought together as a step towards protection of these unprotected monuments. So the key challenge is, of course, how these unprotected monuments, which are, I think India is replete across the country with these such beautiful buildings, and they're just completely disused, and the owner doesn't know where the fund will come from. The owner is waiting. There are a lot of ownership litigations that perhaps also stops any development happening in these places. There are lack of funding to restore it, and adaptive reuse comes as a new. Why new? I mean, it is a kind of a natural and rational thinking of how you can adapt such buildings for modern requirements, and how you can justify the continuance of these wonderful buildings. And here, I think the challenge of, if we take this as a model for protecting the unprotected monuments across the country, which I think world over they have attempted, and some are very successful, some are not so successful. But I think that is something which we have to also grapple with. But the fact remains, these challenges of how you protect these disused buildings is perhaps to repurpose these buildings, to perhaps to adaptively reuse these buildings for raising funds for its repair, to plow it back for repair, to plow it back for income, and so that such initiatives also becomes economically sustainable model, right? There has been a lot of examples across the country today. There are a growing number of examples in the country today. There are fantastic entrepreneurial, creative mechanism of adopting a model of economic model for raising funds with regard to adaptive reuse of heritage buildings. So let us now address what is it that while we are restoring and putting a building to adaptive reuse, what is it that we have to be careful about while doing it? It should not be that the economic needs of should be fulfilled to the highest. It's a adaptation. So each one has to adapt each other. We should not be too greedy to earn in this adaptive reuse plans. At the same time, we should not be too sacrosanct about and purist about the restoration of this building. So it's a fine balance that we have to strike between the need of commerce and preservation, the need of sustainability and protection, the need for raising funds, developing. So there are a lot of innovations that one can think of. And because every such monument, there's so many unprotected monuments, all of them cannot be museums. So it has to earn its own living. And at the same time, it cannot be made to look very cliche and pastiche, so that the significance of these buildings, architectural value, cultural value of these buildings are not obliterated, are not erased for the purpose of reusing them. So I think that's a very tricky challenge that one has to understand. And therefore, one has to understand how one restores a building. And one has to understand how an economic activity can be injected in such spaces, which enables a happy coexistence of the requirement of restoration on the one hand and the requirement of financial sustainability. So that's one of the biggest challenges, is to record, document, of course, protect. Protect means through legislation, then conserve and preserve. And I think reuse, therefore, becomes very, very important in the context of India, where there are a vast number of unprotected monuments in this country. I come to my city of Calcutta, where I worked. I began my work in Calcutta as a person who is walking around the streets of Calcutta, then graduating it and showing to others about the city of Calcutta. Calcutta is often called the cultural capital of India because of various cultural, political, social movement that Calcutta and West Bengal has led, and the remains, the fragments of that still survives. And it's rather a compact city all along the river Hooghly. The central part of Calcutta, like this part of Calcutta, which is called Dalhousie Square, which is the middle part of Calcutta. This is the north part of Calcutta. And this is the south part of Calcutta. And this grew roughly, this was along the river bank, like all other great cities of the world. It's on the river, be it Paris, be it London, be it Egypt, and so on. So Calcutta is no exception. Calcutta was a great city. It was earlier seen from the river. Then with the invention in steel and railways coming in, and then the city was looked from the land. So there was emphasis of seeing the city from that end as well. While all the buildings that was abutting the river, some of them still survives, and some of them still are in various degrees of decay and opulence. So that was Calcutta in the 1850s. And it also grew in manifold. It's got a huge population. It vies with many other populated city with a high density, like Cairo in Egypt, Fez, Morocco, and so on. So, but it's it's a very inward-looking city as well, particularly in the northern part, the traditional neighborhoods of North Calcutta, where buildings are looking inward towards the courtyard. While in the central part, it was more colonial, and the capital of British India, from where India was ruled till 1911, the entire Indian subcontinent, which used to include India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Burma, etc. So, and it was a direct intervention by the British to build an imperial Calcutta in this part of Calcutta called Dalhousie Square, which almost all the buildings still survives in this part, and it was declared as one of the 100 sites by the World Monuments Fund, and it is very much revered and protected today through the local municipal authority. This was a building which was called Bank of Bengal. It was earlier called Imperial Bank. That was demolished around in the 1980s. This bank, State Bank of India, was built on its site. So that's the change of, character, design that evolved, as if by putting some arches, you have respected the past architecture. It's really not so. To me, it looks very grotesque. But however it is, this is what we have got. You get what you want and what you deserve. And this is what perhaps we deserved. That was a very famous, Calcutta and Bengal was very important for education. A lot of people from neighboring states used to come to Calcutta for education. There's a large population, very educated families came to Calcutta. Calcutta University is famous nationally and internationally. It produced a lot of Nobel laureates as well, including Amartya Sen. And this was also demolished in the 1960s to only build something like this in the 70s and the 80s. That is something which we have constantly seen. In the name of development, we kind of build something which no longer catches our imagination of the people of the city. There was this College Street Market, which was destroyed. And these were all unprotected monuments, by the way. There was no protection. There was no legal protection to save them. People were allowed to be demolished without being questioned, because there was no legislation for them. And destruction of College Street Market. And our great architect friend from Mumbai, Hafiz Contractor, conceived this plan, which was started getting built in the 1990s. But then it fell because of lack of financial viability, and it was destroyed. Some columns and some upper structures were built, and then it fell through the implementation of the whole project. Some say it's good that it didn't get implemented yet. Some say that what a waste of time, resource, energy. This effort of pulling down buildings are primarily driven by economic reasons, as well as political reasons, as well as the direction in which the country wants to go. One great example exists in Calcutta. This is the central part where most of the red buildings are listed by the local authority. That's the Dalhousie Square. And this is the Governor House, which is a very beautiful building, built in the same style and form as Governor's House of Kurgan in Derbyshire, Cadleston Hall in Derbyshire. So this overlooks the administrative headquarters of the state of West Bengal, which is called Writers' Building, which is also a fantastic building of the Victorian period. And there's this large water body, this blue part, and there used to be a fantastic visual access between the two. And immediately after independence, we thought of building a very big telephone communication system, and we didn't find any other place but to bang onto this access here, and Telephone Bhavan came in its place, replacing this wonderful small institute building called Dalhousie Institute. And today, with the advent of satellite and 5G and so on and so forth, the entire Telephone Bhavan or Telephone Kendra, which is about 10-story building, destroying the communication. Perhaps it was a deliberate insult to this colonial period, and that it couldn't find any other place to locate. So this extreme deliberate insult often leads to disaster of the planning of an area, which I think could be termed as a disaster in the planning of an area in India. And today, with the advent of 5G and satellite communication, this entire office is almost redundant. You don't need such amount of trunk callers, operators to connect as it used to be 20, 30 years ago. Can there be a reuse purpose of this building? Can this building be pulled down, or can we once again reestablish the visual communication, which is good practice for the point of view of city reordering, city reorganizations, urban design. The city seems to be on sale. Everything is on sale. The Burmese wood, Burma wood, demolishing of that currency building, and so on and so forth. So we have got an unprecedented growth of urban population, which are often the reason why the historic urban districts or areas are under pressure. So unprecedented growth of urban population, which also has a lot of needs. So there's a competition of space with high value development. There's an impact of infrastructure, like through this we have got now an underground metro station, metro connection that goes underneath the river Hooghly onto the other side of the river, which is the railway station called Howrah Station. So the factors that contribute to the destruction often are development and infrastructure pressure. We don't know how to reconcile the need of development and infrastructure with the necessity of cities improvement, the necessity of cities architecture and character, and so on. So that becomes a major factor for destruction of our historic value or value. Why historic only? The value of a city. Every city has its own value. It's one way of developing your city is to not recognize that value and pull down everything and construct anew, which has been seen world over, creates a lot further problem as the days and months and years progresses, than reconciling, than working together, understanding an area, and then making small and big interventions to make the city grow in a much more informed and concerned way. And other human activities, one of which I would recommend, or I would say its other human activities include excessive greed. Of course, the management and legal issues. Legal issues are very important because of ownership and because of social issues and management. We are good in managing our air conditioners. We are good in managing our television sets or cars, but there's no management of cities still observed very effectively. And natural events like disasters or floods, etc., also contributes. Like a lot of cities in Indonesia often comes under huge flooding, which destroys the historic fabric. So the objective is how you make a paradigm shift. How you look upon these as a not as a liability, but look upon this as an asset, and how you convert these liabilities into your assets. How you convert, how you place conservation in the framework of development of your cities. And that is a paradigm shift that we need to work towards, because India is huge and India has got a lot of other parallel initiatives that a developing country like ours need to undertake to catch up with a lot of other issues, be it education, be it health, and be it cleaning our cities, be it proper drainage of our cities. So, but that doesn't mean that you do them one by one. We have to do all of them parallelly. And how you can put these concerns into a development framework, which is not development for development, which is also for addressing each of these issues, including reuse, conservation of the values of your city, and how the development dynamics and frameworks can be envisioned based on your city, and how adaptive reuse, which is a marriage of conservation and development, perhaps holds the answer. But as I said, it's very important that one should not kind of overdo each other. Like looking at an activity to be put into a disused, valued heritage building, one should not overdo that. It's like a relationship. If one person tries to show off too much to the other person, then there's a rupture in that relationship. So as well as either of them get affected. So the point is that how you bring that balance, how you respect the need for conservation, the appropriateness of a conservation. So appropriateness of the conservation is very important. Otherwise, you get a lot of these cliche restored heritage buildings in Rajasthan, which are, or in many other parts. Why only Rajasthan? Which are often called quote unquote heritage havelis, which is to be very careful about when you try to work towards adaptive reuse, which is a reuse of a commercial activity in a sustainable way, respecting the need for conservation in an appropriate manner. And therefore, it's very important to know what are the protocols and principles of conservation to make a building look new and young and too young and too trendy. perhaps defeats the very purpose of conservation. So we need to make conservation plans, which are guidelines or reference document for ongoing conservation initiative. And of course, we should follow certain principles which are time-tested, like respect for documentary evidence. You should not just pull it down for the sake of injecting an activity because you think that is not so important. So you should not base your conservation on thinking that it was not there, and base your restoration on conjecture. So I think that is respect for documentary. You should look for documentary evidence of the building that you're trying to put into adaptive reuse or conserving for adaptive reuse. Respect for the building's history. Do not restore a building to one period at the expense of another period, because often there has been seen that, one period is completely obliterated, saying that it's a later period. The buildings evolve. So saying that this is a English period. Let's not keep that period. Let's only concentrate on the Danish period. So that's a very wrong attitude towards history. Do not restore to one period at the expense of another period. And legibility is very important. Whatever we are trying to do, if we are trying to honestly repair our existing structure, trying to retain as much as the value of the building for which the building is remembered, embedded in the fabric of that building. So the new work, and if you need to add a new work, should be distinguishable from the old, and that's the legibility that we should be not afraid of. We should not try to hide our new material, because new materials doesn't have any wrongness about themselves. So it's the application and where you're applying that is important. So new work should be distinguishable from the old. So that is also another principle that we should keep in mind, which can guide us when we see individual buildings, when we are going ahead restoring a building. And of course, respect for historic material. You cannot if you use non-compatible new developed material while restoring a building, like old buildings used to be in lime and shurki and mortars, brick, bardast, etc. And if you restore it with resin and new material, then there might be a compatible issue. Compatibility is very important. It also destroys, if you are incompatible, it also destroys relationship. So compatibility is also very important. Compatibility of material, and so on and so forth. And respect for the original fabric. Repair with like materials. So if you have a terracotta, you do it with terracotta because they're available. And so the respect with like materials is also important. And of course, further maintenance. Maintenance with continuous care, you can actually reduce the cost of restoration in the future. So conservation, any conservation work, whether we are restoring a monument or whether we are restoring a building for adaptive reuse, needs a very detailed study and assessment. Like any new building, you need a lot of information about the site. You need the condition below the ground. You need the soil tests. And like for an old building, you need to know each and every wall, each and every roofing system, each and every important elements in the building, which are very important. So it requires a very detailed study and assessment, and to arrive at a appropriate and compatible functions and repair methods. And therefore, any conservation action should revolve around three principal tenets, and they have to be very minimal and essential repair. You should not try to be sweeping in your repairs. Let's change this, let's change that. So it can be minimal and essential. You can identify what is essential repair, what is essential that needs to be repaired to keep this building going for another 50 years. Only can stem from the fact of a detailed assessment and study of the building, and use of compatibility and use of reversibility. This reversibility is very important because we should not, if we have to add a new thing, let's add a new thing with the knowledge that we have of the new thing today. The next generation might have a better knowledge. We might instead of they might have a newer material. So how that can be continued by the next generation, because buildings evolve, buildings change. So how, if we are taking a decision today of adding something, how a later period should not be denied to reverse your action for a better solution. So ideally, how it can be unbolted. So if you're doing something today, don't impregnate, don't get into the old building and insert all your structural members into the building. Rather, use the present technology of keeping a small little gap in between, if that is possible, because old building has already lived for long, so their foundation below is more settled. But if you're doing something new, the foundation is yet to settle over a period of time. So if you are attaching the new to the old in a physical sense, then you are also creating or giving a load to the old building, and that junction might be a constant problem. I will just quickly go through the projects that we did, because that's really not the intention of this talk. We did a lot of restoration with these principles in mind. And we did a lot of these monuments, churches, both in Calcutta, in other parts of India, as well as one church in England, which we did it with a lot of care, attention, following most of the protocols of conservation. And it's very important. If you want to claim yourself that I'm a retrofitting architect, that doesn't mean that you should not know what are the principles of conservation. It's very important to know the principles of conservation while you do other things with it. And as I said, am I audible? Are you with me?
Yes, sir, we are.
Are you with me? Because I've spoken about...
Sir, no, we are with you, but sometime we are putting off our videos.
Right.
For easy streaming, because we are streaming too. So if
Right.
too many videos are on, it disturbs the streaming. That's why. But we are very much with you.
Right. Thank you so much. So as I said, every conservation work has to follow with detailed drawing and assessment. So you need to do all these very detailed measure drawing to know what is the constituent, what is the material, what is the form and design, where are the bulging of the bricks, and so on and so forth. And also make a lot of assessment about historical archival research. What were the interventions done to the building before? Which are newer interventions, which are older original fabric, and so on. And then you have to document that floor-wise, elevations, architectural details based on your archival research. And then the details are to be enlarged so that they are for posterity. As I said, conservation plan is a reference document, even for the future. So measure drawings of the site plan, etc. And then you have to analyze, do the condition survey and map the assessment on the drawn measured drawing, and mortar and plaster, doors and windows, where are the places where the vegetations are streamed, what are the condition of the drainage, where are we noticing the structural distress, and so on and so forth. They all need to be mapped for assessment. And a condition survey of plaster, mortar, rainwater pipe are all to be mapped and understood very detailed wise, so that we can then select. We cannot select the entire mortar from the entire building, so we can carefully select where there are doubts being generated, looking at the plan, mapping the condition on the plans and elevations and sections, and then select mortar from areas which can give you more insight into the old and the new, which one is an old structure and which was the. So selecting samples of mortars and plasters from various locations, and then getting the results and mapping them on the plan as well. Like, what is the constituent of the mortar at this location in terms of sand, in terms of lime and constituents. So mapping them and putting the figure of the results of the chemical test of the mortar. This is the mortar sample that you have taken. So where from you have taken, mapping it there, and so on and so forth. And then giving it for laboratory tests. And of course, the structural analysis. When we were doing this, it was funded by the World Monuments Fund. And they came up with a question before they were finally approving our proposal that the tower is very tall, and does it have an earthquake resistance? If we are putting so much of money into the building, we need to assure ourselves and assure our funding agency that, you know, this is worth putting the money and it has no structural problem so far as earthquake is concerned. So we did a earthquake study of the structural analysis of the tower. Fortunately, it was by the sheer volume and mass of these buildings, it was pretty earthquake resistant. And then you estimate based on the quantity that you can easily get from these drawings, and you specify the material that goes into the specification of each and every item of work, and that becomes based on your study, your analysis, your condition assessment, your analysis of the material, and so on. And you specify repair items, repair specification to continue based on the principles of conservation. And while you are doing it, you also do some very simple tests of compatibility, the lime that you're using, whether they're compatible. So that's ball test and testing of lime, which are all recommended by our Indian Standard Code. And then you work it with a traditional way of lime terracing on roof, which you have to do. This lime terracing varies from place to place. In Madras, it's called Madras terracing. In here, it's called Jolchad. So even the Chinese, the traditional technique of roofing is there all over the world, particularly the flat roof, which Bengal has got a number of them. Not changing, as I said, your specification cannot be sweeping. Like change all the rainwater pipe or all the down pipes. You know, you bring it out, and then see reused. So there is an application of reuse even in restoring a church, and finding out the detail is erecting scaffolding is another very important. Cleaning the surface before identifying weak plaster zones, etc., and rectifying of the arch. We had a problem with this arch in the sense that it was restored earlier and restored very unsympathetically, and so the arch actually had a problem with the curves. One side of the curve was at a certain angle, the other side of the curve was at a certain angle. So it was extremely inappropriate. So we rectified that arch with least intervention. And we make samples of the plaster, and then we try to adopt a specification mortar for repair. And that's how the gutters are very important. Simple things. Water is a very important and difficult material to be aware of and to be away from the building. So all earlier monuments will have some lovely, very elaborate drainage systems, which can be revived, and that will go a long way in putting this back. Now, the tin roof, I don't know, I'm sure you may know that today the tin is a very old material. Tin can survive as long as 80 to 100 years, if not more. Today, the tins that we get are very thin. These tins are to the tune of 0.1 mm. Today we get in terms of 0.5, 0.47, and so on. So it's not a good practice to replace the entire tin with Tata Blue scope all the time. These tins can be really, if you brush them, you will see how beautiful they are still, and they can be reused. Yes, some of them may be wrong, and some of them maybe have gone out of place. Those can be replaced. And then doing some very good innovative chemicals that we have today in the modern times, like zinc chromate and primers, which can be adopted to increase the longevity of these tins. Another major problem of is how you take out the vegetation from the building, and often while taking out the vegetation, we also take out the original brick and mortar of the adjacent brick walls, which is, in the strictest sense of the term, you're erasing the value of the building. So how, without least destruction to the neighboring structure, how you can devegetate the building? So you have to be a little more patient and not try to be macho with the building. You can use traditional chemicals like hing, and put it with cotton at places where the roots are very big, and wait for 6-7 days, and it will automatically dry in a very, very organic way, and you can then slowly and easily pull it out. And they get shrink, and see the way that we have even could retrieve the channel through which the pipes are coming down. And of course, curing is very important. When you're plastering a surface, you have to cure, even for modern construction. Old construction is also similar. So curing is very important, which is spraying water to a newly plastered surface. Damp is another very big problem in Calcutta. We have got a high water table because we sit right on the river, along the river. So you see a lot of rising damp on the wall, which has a problem with the rising water through the porosity of the brick, like leaf, yeah, ascent of sap. So the water from the ground rises through the pores of the bricks up on the wall, because earlier construction never had a damp-proof course at the plinth like the modern construction has. So how you address that? And with this rise, the water also carries with it salt and sulfide, which can create a lot of efflorescence on the wall, and it becomes white patches all over. And if you have painted, all the paints kind of peel off and so on. So addressing the rising rising damp is very important. So how you put nozzle and try to create a post-construction hydrophobic zone, meaning how you can fill up those pores and how you can restrict the rising damp from below. So those are very, very important. And before brushing with a soft brush, a coir brush is very important. This picture shows how you spray for curing water, how you brush and clean the most of the surfaces before you start putting lime paint, and how you repoint them. How you repoint them so that the joints are sealed after injecting in the pores to stop or arrest the rising damp. And even for the floor, it's not very important that you always use, expensive stickers to joint the floor so that the mortar doesn't splay on the stone besides. Even an ordinary, newspaper could do that purpose. Which we adopted because every money counts in a restoration in a country where there are a huge amount of money for our highways and driveways and flyovers, but there's not enough money yet spent by the government for restoration. That was a very bad image of Calcutta. Trees are growing on the tower, a very historic tower, 300 years old. So we could manage to clean the tower, deweed the places. It was almost a forest on the tower. And we could clean it up with great effectiveness and bring it back to its. We have not cleaned it to look that it was built yesterday. Yeah, that age is also visible, but it is cleaned. It has been arrested further deterioration. So inside it was like this, and then it was converted into this, and slowly we could reform. These are all lime paint, which is a fantastic paint. The cost is almost, the new paint is almost 5 times the cost of lime paint. And but even if you're spending that amount of money with the new acrylic paint, you need to paint again after 5 years, while the cost is 5 times more or more than that. So the relevance, instead of lime paint or lime wash, can perhaps be painted every 3 years, which does a lot of good to the building. And so that is how it was kind of converted. A very beautiful church another church in Calcutta called Jora Girja Twin Towers, which has been very beautifully crafted at a very judicious use of money. Not spent huge amount of money here and there, replacing, changing, and so on. And that's how we could reform these buildings. And it was rededicated by the Reverend Bishop in many years. This was another building, which is, I think, the first example, the first project of mine, Vidyasagar's house, who taught us the Bengali alphabet in a way, who was against Sati. He helped Ram Mohan to work towards that. And he was a great friend of part of the Bengal Renaissance. And Bengal Renaissance was part of Renaissance of India in many ways. So we could do that early. We spent huge amount of money. We spent huge amount of money. We means the government, legal case to vacate the building which was occupied by Vidyasagar, and we could repair it in a very, very modest but very purely and honestly, and bring it back to its glory. We inserted this in the louvers. One of my good friend, Tondra Chando, did the stained glass, and we inserted this as part of the louver, and we could conserve this and reverse the decline and put it into an open university training center, and IGNOU courses were and tests were done. And one of the rooms, two of the rooms, has been converted into a little, a small but effective museum. Talking about, it was about 5,000 square feet. It was about 15 lakhs, which comes to roughly around 5,000, 15 lakhs, about 500 rupees per square foot. Quite a lot earlier, 600 rupees. So conservation is viable. Conservation is not only rich man's proposition. It is not only, what is important to be taken is it has to be done authentically. It has to be done judiciously and spuriously, right? And many other buildings like this. This is a wonderful building of Goodrick tea, the tea that we drink. It's one of the part of a larger agglomerate, worldwide, largest producer of tea in the world, called Camellia PLC, of which Goodrick tea is part. So they had this building which was redundant, and their chairman used to come to Calcutta every 3 times a year for board meetings, and used to spend huge amount of money occupying 3 or 4 suites in Grand Hotel. So they decided to, they rationalized their thinking, and they said that, let's restore this building, and this be the chairman's guest house, because we anyway spend so much of money for putting him up for 7 days, 3 times a year. That is good enough for restoring this building. So we managed to restore this lovely building, besides the Goodrick head office in Calcutta. And this was the original old Italian marble that was there. This wooden staircase existed, but little jolted. So we kind of repaired and renewed parts, and the roof was reconstructed based on the same principles of conservation of beams and runners. So instead of wooden beam, which are very difficult to get of such large spans, we used steel beams, and then on the top we placed runners, and on the top we placed tiles, and like traditional construction. So we have continued the same method of construction, and that's how we kind of confirmed and reformed the place very beautifully, very simple yet so elegant. It will not give you, it will give you a fantastic sense of space. The way, the decor, the modesty with which it has been done. It's all very expensive stuff that was put in, but the modesty, there are certain expensive things which tries to say, look at me. And there are certain expensive things which tries to underplay, saying, don't look at me together, and so on. So this is one of those aesthetics, which has been percolated into every detail of the interior. And so it's very, very simple, but very elegant. And this was, the floor was renewed because, and it was renewed in the same form that existed, but these are all new marbles. This is the only a non-air conditioned space, but the rest are all air conditioned space. Another building, the Imami Group, which is one of the five big FMCG company today in India. Uh, uh, Started their business 35 years ago with 3,500 rupees. And that grew into 35,000 crore company. And with a lot of respect, they called me the Manish Babu. Would you be interested to work in this project? And so we worked on this project. We did detailed documentation, and the building never existed on the third floor. You see, this is the projected porch balcony, and the building starts about 6 meter after. This is a 6 meter porch, and then the building starts. So we added this. We added this floor. We added on the top of another floor. This particular floor was added on the. That's what we see. This is a new part. And since it was recessed, it is not really affecting at the ground level the elevation of the building. And when we walked into this property, it evoked a lot of awe and respect because of its proportion, because of its robustness, because of its orderliness, because of the, and however robust and orderly, and it was also very intimate, and it was still all the traditional methods was seen. So we conceived a reuse plan with 4 pillars of Imami's philanthropy. Spirituality, so we maintained the temple. They started training classes of the neighborhoods on women's empowerment, giving them education of how to cook with less oil, and so on. And healthcare, they're heavily into healthcare. So that became a referral center. They started a eye center for the neighborhood, and they spent their CSR funding for the restoration of this bit. And it was, so that's the additional floor that we constructed. This was the parapet because the building ended here. So from the parapet, we raised the columns. And we could see while documenting some of the remaining elements of the building. So we took a note of that and restored it in the same form and style as the building. So across a period of 5 years, I'm talking about permission, sanctions, thinking, appointment. The work took place about 2.5 years. And we could convert this 2015 to reverse this building into this wonderful edifice at Muktaram Babu Street in Kolkata. So it demonstrated that more just another repurposed property, it represents a model for responsible heritage rejuvenation. And that's very important. How one should be conscious that how your restoration effort should not make it a cliche, should not erase its authenticity. I will not run this video. Maybe if you have time, we can run the video. I'll go with the last lap of another property where it's upstream. So if you go upstream towards the north of Bengal, you come to an area where I did a lot of work in the last 5 years. I restored a church there. It's called Srirampur. I restored a church there. I restored the fort gatehouse, 2 gates on either side, and a very decrepit, ruinous building on the river where you see the flag here. It's this building. I restored this building. I restored this building, and the fort wall, part fort wall that existed there, and so on. So this is the plan, which is the church. You see, it was planned by the Danish. This is the church, and this is the old courthouse and the main governor house. That has an access, leads to the flag that we saw, this flag that we saw there. And that's a very dilapidated restaurant or a tavern by the side of the river. So we can, this is the plan. So National Museum of Denmark in Copenhagen established an MOU with the West Bengal Heritage Commission and the district of Hooghly, and they initiated a competition, and we also participated in the competition, and this tavern was then given to us. We won the competition. And before we go to the tavern, this is another project that I did, where the conservation of the church of St. Olav Church was also equally. I'll quickly go through this because we have seen how we go about detailed documentation, knowing the elements, knowing the building very carefully and thoroughly, doing the assessment, mapping of the condition of the roof system, doing the analysis of the various ceilings, the flutings, wooden beams, etc. Taking samples from various places, putting it for tests, finding out what would have been the original paint analysis of the structure, and then devising a mechanism of how you can go ahead doing the restoration of the roof, then relaying it with lime concrete, curing it with straw, so that the water that is given is not dried very quickly, because if the water dries up quickly, the roof develops a lot of cracks, and then slowly getting the building back to its glorious state. Looking at the window, which are very large, about 12-15 feet high, and so conserving that, it became a talk of the town, where we kind of slowly and very steadily, those are the tiles on the top of which we will put the concrete. And that was the condition, and we reversed this condition, and it was beautifully, this is all lime paint, not a single today's chemical paint, and which won us an UNESCO award of benchmarking conservation in Bengal and the South Asian region, which we got UNESCO Heritage Award of Distinction after Japan, which also was participating in this application. The site of Hiroshima, where it won the main award, and we stood second as a distinction amongst the Asia Pacific countries. And so heritage belongs to everyone. You know, it was a kind of a rejoice, protecting and preserving the historic environment, and everybody participated. With a slum here on the left, not very rich area, but then the people of the city and the town got a new place to gather together, and so on. That's the ruinous thing that I was talking about by the side of the river, which is my last thing that I would like to mention here, is that it was a ruin. And 20 years ago, I was, as I said, I used to walk around the city of Kolkata in Bengal with my old Nikon camera, and I used to click buildings and places. So this is one of the buildings that I clicked in negatives. And 20 years later, when I won the competition for this building, of how to reuse this building, I fortunately preserved my slides, and I got back to my huge number of slides that I had, and culled this building out, which was a great source of inspiration and information. My picture in the middle, which I took 25 years before. And this is the research documents that we collected from National Museum of Denmark Library, archival library. somebody painted this building in 1790 like this. And in 1810, we saw a round dome and a staircase block, circular staircase block in front, which in little later in 1827, the circular dome is seen to be behind. So this created a lot of confusion. This created a lot of confusion to where was that circular dome? Was it in front or was it at the rear? And so when we started, we did a little bit of archaeological excavation. That's how the building was. We started an archaeological excavation, and we found that this picture, which shows that dome there, was actually at the behind. So this confusion was erased by my archival photograph. So I really patted myself that I had an archive information about this building. But it became very helpful in our discussion about where should we locate that circular staircase. So we did an archaeological excavation to find out the site for the staircase, and we relocated. This was the condition of the building. It was a restoration brick by brick. We worked together with a lot of craftsmen, and so by bit, we kind of stitched the brick with modern brick and old brick simultaneously, and we could slowly bring it back to its, the walls are bulging, so we kind of pushed them back, and instead of constructing a roof, we knew that we will put this into a cafe and some limited accommodation for staying, because it is right on the river. So we used, once again, not wooden beam, but hollow sections, following the same methods of construction. And we converted that into a cafe with a little puncture, which can bring in more lights from above as well. And we restored this building, inspired by the coffee house as well, that exists in Calcutta, and was very, very simple but very well proportioned. We push it back, and we inaugurated, which was built in 1786, called the Denmark Tavern, and everybody enjoyed it. It was inaugurated, launched, where all the 7 Scandinavian countries came together, along with the West Bengal Heritage Commission and West Bengal Tourism, and it was put back into a 6-suite accommodation with cafe in the center, and it was then leased out by the tourism to a private player for its running and maintenance, which is right on the river, and it was also repurposed. And so the tourism earns a kind of a money at the end of the year. Park runs the hotel and the restaurant, and it's a win-win situation. Everybody finds a reason and feasibility to participate in such an effort, and the building is resurrected, is saved. The history is not erased. The history continues and finds relevance in today's economy. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We don't know how to withdraw from the lecture actually. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
We were so much immersed, we don't know how to withdraw from the lecture. It was really a wealth of information and real, a real representation of what can be done. So before I go into my concluding remarks, there are a few questions. Maybe we will be able to take a few of them, which has come to me. Sir, could you put your title slide here?
Yeah,
On
should
the
I title slide?
Yes.
Okay, from beginning. Yeah.
Just the title slide.
Yeah, this is the title slide. Can you see it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And just a minute, sir. So a few questions have come. Many of them I have put because my students could not. Just like, so could we take a one or two questions, sir? A few
Sure.
questions.
Why one, two, many, if required.
Okay.
Can I
So
ask you?
it's from,
May I ask him a
yes, sir.
question? I am Rajiv Mishra, principal of JJ College of Architecture.
Hi, Rajiv.
Hi, Manishda. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
It is such a great pleasure to listen to you, sir. Thank you so much for taking out time to share your knowledge and wisdom. Thank you, APJ, for conducting this lecture. It is such a wonderful experience of learning. Manishda,
Yes, sir.
Manisha, every time today there is a threat to heritage properties through lot of pressure of urbanization.
Yes.
There are lot of urbanization push factor which actually leading to capitalist mindset.
Yes.
So you have any trick idea where you can actually help change the mind of capitalist owners or capitalist people so that conservation and restoration of such beautiful examples of architecture marvels could be saved?
Yeah. I think, I think it's a very, very valid and very important question. Capitalism thought that the way to serve the nation and the people is by deciding the least denominator which is beneficial for the people, so that they can decide their own future. Socialism, on the other hand, thought that they will take care of their basic necessities, like shelter, food, and they should be involved. The Russia and China and others would be investing on nation building. So I think we have seen CSR is a good example. Greed, I think the very corporate social responsibility, for power and I would say it's not only responsibility, it also can make a very honest or accumulation of healthy leads to business proposition. Non only rider being the purpose for which they are there. Stop. So where I think adaptive you are seeing that you're rejecting the value at these of the place where you're making money. I think redundancy that in our society should be given more incentives for heritage, or be it for many other government should play a more role of enabling that to happen. And I think it could be a way of revival. I don't know. It's a very big question. Attract but the minds of the capitalists, or I would say capitalists who have got money and are already coming. Like it could be in Bengal. I know Mr. Neotia has taken up a couple of buildings.
Right.
How they can be there are many other examples interested. Bombay and Calcutta have got by private and rational spending,
Right.
which can be capital by the capitalists, putting in intrinsic while respecting the which leads value to and a lot of characterization and
Thank you, Manishda.
personalization,
Thank you so much.
regionalism.
Thank you, sir.
Of that
I invite
place.
the others
So I
also
think the
to
real
ask
challenge is
questions
that, and
in case you have some. So anybody else wants to join the discussion? Or else some of my students have actually given some queries which I have received on
Sure.
chat. So I would like to read out a few of them. So like one of the students is asking that if adaptive reuse helps to conserve the tangible part of the architectural features buildings, but some way compromising the original intangible essence function it was meant for. Can you suggest some measures to be kept in mind to equally keep the intangible heritage to intact and not only depending on museum as a means? I think she means is that mostly what we are doing is we are converting these buildings into museums. But what happens if museum is not needed in every place or are not an economically viable proposition for everything else? So how do then the economic want or need is balanced? So
the
sometimes
notion of museum, I tell you, the notion of museum increasingly has changed. The museums are now effectively playing They're coming out of their building. Museums are initiating city-wide corrections and engagement and making the city more happening. It's the museum authorities who are doing it. Museums are playing a very important role in making the city known to its people. So traditionally, museums have been inside a building. It still is, but they are going out. They're doing this initiative in another place. Like that has been a practice, which is a very latest way of looking at museum. Yes, I fully agree. Museumization of heritage is not perhaps take us long and far. As I said very briefly in my presentation, that for the West, for the Western world, conservation is only appropriate and rational to do because they have a negative birth rate, they have a huge amount of redundancy. If they do a development plan, half of their properties do not get sold because there's not enough people to occupy them. And therefore conservation is only natural and appropriate and rational. In our context, we are a developing nation, and therefore there is a tendency that crops up. This whole building, ye kya hoga? Let's break this. Let's build a 20-story here, and so on. And we have also seen in some countries, Western countries, that this trend of converting every building into a museum has, to an extent, museumized parts of London, parts of UK. That is not a practice that perhaps India can do. Rather, India should conceive activities which can generate funds and while being sensitive to restoring the building and keep that character going. Otherwise, the other option is very disastrous, to replace it. So you have to find out, or one has to find out, that adaptive reuse and repurposing buildings is a positive direction in that direction, positive method in that direction. I agree with you. Museum in the earlier sense of the term should be, there's a change in that perception of conducting a museum, number one. Number two, in all buildings should not be thought of in terms of museum, because museum means very little less ticketed thing, and it doesn't really earn its own living. It once again gets into a beg and borrow situation. So it has to earn its own living while being sensitive to
old RBC slab, sorry, old RBC slab whose reinforcements are rusting. So, what could be the possible techniques to restore it?
Yeah, that's a very interesting. I'm pleased that you know about RBC. It's a very interesting method of construction, right? Your brick, it's almost like an arch, flat arch, where you just reinforce every alternate layer of bricks with a reinforcement, steel reinforcement. One is, of course, there are you have to brush them out because it scales over a period of time. The moment it receives oxidation, it scales up. So you have to brush it up, and then put some kind of a chemicals, either Cicadur, or Cicadur is basically a polymer and an anti-rusting thing, to do that, and then replaster it the way we jacket a column, particularly in the basement, and do that way. So basically taking the plaster out from the ceiling, exposing, brushing the thing in a very clean way, and then applying some kind of a anti-rust chemical like Cicadur or silicone or silicate, and then replastering it with some weather, water repellent chemical, which is compatible to the plaster that we are doing. Yeah.
Thank you. I think the answer he has got. Another question. I have actually many questions, but I have time for one or two questions more. So actually, this is also very interesting. When we are adding floors, like you showed in that project, then we would be needing the strengthening and all. So how do you balance retaining of the originality? You are saying that we have to retain the originality, but you are adding one floor. So how
Yeah.
you compromise with the
Yeah, I
strengthening?
said we have to retain the originality. I mean, when I was young, my height was 2. I am a little older now. My height has become 4. I'm still original. But the point is, it's me still. Buildings also change. But the question is how you would bring about the change so that it doesn't replace a value that the building stands for, right? The building doesn't stand for it. The building represents a certain value, which is architectural. So if, as I said, it was behind, we have a front and porch, which is about 6 meters ahead. And the aesthetics, the pleasure that the building used to emanate to the immediate environment, by adding that floor, we were not actually destroying that value, right? It was possible, it was within the capacity, without tarnishing its value. That's an aesthetic judgment that I took, that everybody appreciated. And another thing is, we have to also think that without making it absolutely non-functional, and by adding a little more space, we actually justify appropriateness and incentives to the owner, who can monetize, or who can earn a little more and put in little more activity, which in turn can keep this building forever, right? So that is the justification. So it's a trade-off, but it's an informed trade-off. It's a concerned trade-off. It's a trade-off which has been arrived at with a lot of deliberation and discussion. It's not a hurried, rushed trade-off. Because at the end of the day, the purpose is to coexist.
So it is a demonstration of the
To
principle of
coexist and
happy
to be
coexist.
happy, to be sustainable.
Yes. So demonstration of that principle. So actually we do not have, we have run out of time actually basically, but we have
Yeah.
many questions, and one was very interesting. Our students wanted to know about the Santiniketan project, but I think I have to arrange another talk for that
Yeah,
today
Santiniketan.
because that's a very good, and I know the scale of that project also. So this is an advance invitation. Probably we'll arrange another talk for that topic particularly.
Right.
And
Ma'am, I also had a question.
Yes, you have a question. Somebody has a question.
Sorry, ma'am, do we have time? I'm sorry.
no, you can take 2 minutes of it, not a problem.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir, I'm also an MARC student. So this is one of the projects that we picked up for our studio.
Which one?
Sir, for MARC, the studio conservation. So what we
Yes.
are doing is we've taken up the topic of industrial conservation.
Right.
So industrial buildings.
Right.
What I've read mostly, unfortunately, that mostly it's the monuments and the older structures. There is very few work that has been done regarding industrial buildings or the restorations or their adaptive reuse.
Right.
The actually question was, most of these buildings, or like for example in Delhi we're doing some mill, or there is a barkhana. They are all located in a very commercial space. Now the land value is way too high. I mean, and like you earlier you said, one first option everybody thinks about adaptive reuse is a museum, but that I feel is never self-sustaining. I mean, it's a personal opinion, but it is difficult for it to become self-sustaining.
Yeah.
But from an industrial building, doing that museum or doing, and because of its land value, I'm trying to figure out what are the best possible. I mean, if you could shed some light of how or what. I mean, because there's very little. I mean, I've been able to read on that topic, especially in India.
Right. No, I mean, there are examples, there are global examples of how the industrial warehouses have been converted with great amount of interventions and aesthetics being restored and kept in many parts of England. And the entire revival of Boston's redundant industrial warehouses, industrial factories, is a revival of the city of Boston. The Main Street project in USA is a revival in many ways. And there are examples even in Bombay, where the mill area has been converted. Of course, that is also kind of preceded by a lot of agitation of the people who used to work there.
There's contention, and because I think the land value is way too high. Sorry, sir.
Yeah, but I thought that you were asking how. I mean, I did say that every building cannot be thought of to be a museum, because you raised the question of economic sustainability. Yes, it's all understanding. The thing is how you work within a capacity. Yeah, the capacity is very important. If you want to do something beyond the capacity, it becomes out of place, out of context, out of many other out of things. Yeah. So Bombay, there are some social costs, some human costs that was involved there. right? Which I don't know whether they were looked into, there was some discontentment. But physically, there has been a lot of transformation happening in an otherwise gaunted mill area. Like in Manchester, all the cloths that were getting produced in mills of Manchester, and that was the purpose of the English, to sell it, to take the cotton from the colonized country and produce it there and resell it back to the colonies. So there were a huge number of textile mills that were there in Manchester. It was called Manchester cloth. When Gandhi said no to Manchester cloth in India, people in Manchester went out of occupation and employment. Right. And in 2000, when I was there and I was involved in a regeneration bid, they had this scheme of the government that you can regeneration scheme, which means that you are not only to look at the viability of the restoration of the mills, but also look into the other environmental degradation that may have occurred there. So funding for drainage, funding for education, ill health, children getting hayward, funding for children, all were put together, all disparate fundings were put together under the scheme called regeneration bid. So I was involved in creating that bid on behalf of a company in London, where I did my internship called Urbid. And there we transformed these mills into creche in the morning and restaurants and nightclubs in the night. And at that time, Hong Kong was getting transferred to China. And a lot of English people were coming back to London and UK. So we also created housing in these textile mills of Manchester. This particular place is called Miles Plotting and Ancoats. And it was a great success story where all these mills were not converted into a museum, but very habitable spaces, little expensive at times. And then you popularize it by making a community around that area happy, right? So if you can also look into business in the community, programs like that, small business, small businesses there can be many, and that can bring in a liveliness in that otherwise very derelict area when Gandhi said no to Manchester cloth and everybody went into unemployment. So I think, when you address an industrial sector, be it in Calcutta or be it in Bombay or be it in Manchester or be it in Boston, you have to look it a little beyond the building. And because these were society generators, these mills were directly linked to the occupation of a community or a fraternity, right? So to keep your scope and delineation of your project a little beyond the building, the rest is easy. You have to be honest. You have to be technically sound, and you have to be guided by the protocols for restoring and retrofitting. You need not. You need to be those people. That is 10% of the thing. To technically restore it to its former glory, and you can even add or subtract a bit, because because it's quite vast and repetitive. Industrial structures have got large spans. It can take different kind of functions. Unlike the old traditional thick masonry buildings, which has got a lot of partitions in between. Industrial structures means post-industrial revolution as well. So it has got large span spaces, like the warehouses in Calcutta, and so on. So I think it is amenable for a lot of options for reuse, depending on the location where you are.
Thank you,
Thank
sir,
you,
for
sir,
the
for that.
illustrative answer. And I think all good things must end. People are having many, many questions, but for the lack of time, I have to end this good discussion and very, very useful discussion. And takeaways are many, but the main takeaway is what sir said, that you often get what you deserve. So maybe we have to first concentrate on teaching people, the educated ones and the laymen also, that we deserve something out, and what we deserve by saving our heritage, by improving them, by repurposing that, maybe creating that awareness and teaching them is the most important work that we have in our hands. Then only the due importance and the everything will be gained. And second thing that sir has said is very important. I also used to think that conservation doesn't relate to past, but conservation relates to future. We just have to know how to reconcile the both. So that has been very great, and I thank you, sir, for this lecture, and also actually the love of buildings and particularly conservation. I started when I passed out. I was working with him for the Dalhousie documentation, Dalhousie area documentation. I don't know whether sir remembers it, because it was for a very brief period.
Yes, of
But
course, I remember.
okay, but it has just engendered the love for our environment, the buildings, the heritage. And I think this lecture has also done the same for many people who have joined us. And once we share the recording, it will increase its outreach. So thank you very much, sir. Maybe some questions we will be sending to you over on email, and we would
Right.
request your answer because many questions remain unanswered.
Right.
And you have responded very quickly to our invitation without worrying
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
all this formal. That is another thing I am very thankful to you for.
Yes.
So,
Thank you
with a
so
very
much. Thank you
happy
so
note
much.
and enriched note, I bid goodbye to all.
Yeah.
Thank you, all the participants, for being in the meeting. Actually,
Great. I'm very pleased that all of you have come, and I will be very pleased if you enjoyed it. Some messages have gone through. I am available on my mobile and my which can be easily shared with
sure, sir.
from Deepashri. And
Sure.
thank you, Rajiv. I'm
Yes,
that you
I'm
also.
so glad. I'm so
Yeah.
glad that I'm able to
Yeah.
talk to you, hear you. Thank you, Dipashri. It was wonderful to hear
Thank
my
you, sir.
friend.
So
Yeah.
thank you for enlivening the discussion. We need
Yes.
people who understand and enliven the discussion as well. And sir, Shanti Niketan remains for another
Yes.
day. We
We'll
will
do that.
eagerly wait for it.
Yeah.
Sure.
At
Thank you very much.
Shantiniketan. At Shantiniketan.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, we will
Bye, sir.
eagerly.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
So
Thank you.
participants can log off now.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Sir,
you.
sir, can we have a 1 minute? 1 minute. Can we have a screenshot if we all
Please.
put on our videos for a very brief period? If you all are comfortable, we would request your video for a very brief.